The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Buckingham Palace as Catherine, the Princess of Wales, adjusted her navy blue dress one final time. She stood before the gilded mirror in the blue drawing room, her fingers trembling slightly as they touched the emerald ring on her right hand. The ring had been hidden away for months, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal its existence. Outside the drawing room, the palace staff moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for the weekly family gathering. These meetings had become tradition since King Charles III ascended the throne, a way to maintain unity within the royal family despite the undercurrents of tension that ran beneath their polished exterior. Catherine took a deep breath, knowing that today would change everything. The ring on her finger wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It had belonged to Princess Diana, given to her in secret during a private moment years before Diana's tragic death. Diana had specifically instructed that it should go to the wife of her eldest son when the time was right, when she needed strength to face difficult challenges within the palace walls. The existence of this ring had been unknown to everyone, including William. Diana had entrusted it to her former butler, Paul Burrell, with explicit instructions. When Catherine married William, Burrell had quietly approached her during a charity event, slipping her an envelope with a letter from Diana and the ring wrapped in velvet. Catherine had kept this secret for years, waiting for the moment when revealing it would serve its intended purpose. In another wing of the palace, Camilla, the queen consort, sat at her vanity table, carefully applying the final touches of her makeup. Her lady-in-waiting, Susan Rhodes, stood nearby, holding a leather folder containing the agenda for today's family meeting. Camilla had worked hard to establish her position within the family, navigating years of public scrutiny and private battles to stand where she was now. "Your Majesty, the family will be gathering in the white drawing room in 30 minutes, Susan said softly. Camilla nodded, her eyes fixed on her reflection. She had noticed changes in the palace dynamics lately. Catherine had become more confident, more willing to speak up during family discussions. It was a shift that didn't go unnoticed by someone who had spent decades learning to read the subtle signs of palace politics. Meanwhile, William waited in his study, reviewing papers for his environmental initiative. He noticed Catherine had been particularly quiet that morning, a distant look in her eyes as she prepared for the day. When he asked if everything was all right, she had simply smiled and kissed his cheek, saying she had something important to share with the family. The white drawing room had been chosen for these gatherings because of its neutral position within the palace. Unlike other rooms that carried heavy historical significance or personal connections to various family members, this space allowed for relatively equal footing. The room's cream-colored walls and elegant furnishings created an atmosphere of refined calm, though everyone knew that beneath the surface, tensions often simmered. Charles arrived first, as was his custom. He believed in punctuality as a sign of respect and expected the same from his family. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the palace gardens. The burden of kingship weighed heavily on his shoulders, made more complex by the need to balance his role as sovereign with his desire to modernize the monarchy. Harry and Meghan entered next, having flown in from California specifically for this meeting. Their presence always added an extra layer of complexity to family gatherings. They exchanged polite greetings with Charles, the conversation stilted but civil. The wounds from their departure from royal duties were still healing, and everyone was careful not to disturb the fragile peace. And the Princess Royal arrived with her characteristic no-nonsense demeanor. She had little patience for palace intrigue, preferring to focus on her numerous charitable obligations. However, she possessed sharp instincts and had noticed the same shifts in dynamics that Camilla had observed. Edward and Sophie, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, entered quietly, taking their seats without fanfare. They had learned over the years that sometimes the best position in royal politics was to observe rather than participate actively. When Catherine entered the room with William, several family members noticed something different about her. She carried herself with a new sense of purpose, her spine straight, and her chin lifted. The navy blue dress she wore was elegant but understated, allowing the emerald ring on her hand to catch the light without seeming ostentatious. Camilla entered last, as befitted her position as queen consort. She swept into the room with practiced grace, her pale blue ensemble carefully chosen to project authority while remaining appropriate for a family gathering. Her eyes quickly scanned the room, taking note of everyone's position and demeanor. The meeting began with routine matters. Charles discussed upcoming state visits, charitable initiatives. The family reviewed their calendar of events. Catherine participated in the discussions with her usual intelligence and grace, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation in her manner that didn't go unnoticed. It was during a discussion about the allocation of royal patronages that the moment arrived. The conversation had turned to Diana's former charities, some of which had been without royal patrons since her death. It was a sensitive topic that the family usually navigated carefully. "I believe it's time we address the elephant in the room," Catherine said, her voice clear and steady. Many of Diana's charities have been waiting for proper royal attention. As the wife of her eldest son and the mother of her grandchildren, I feel a responsibility to honor her legacy. The room fell silent. Everyone knew this was delicate territory. Camilla's relationship with Charles had been the source of immense pain for Diana, and despite the years that had passed, the ghost of the people's princess still haunted the palace halls. "Of course, we all want to honor Diana's memory," Camilla said carefully, her tone measured. "But we must be careful about how we proceed. The public can be quite sensitive about these matters." Catherine stood, moving to the center of the room. "I agree completely, which is why I think it's time I shared something with all of you." She held up her right hand, allowing the emerald ring to catch the light. "This ring belonged to Diana. She left it specifically for me, with instructions that I should wear it when the time came to carry forward her work." The silence in the room was deafening. Charles's face had gone pale, his eyes fixed on the ring. Harry leaned forward, his expression a mixture of shock and something that might have been hope. William looked at his wife in amazement, clearly seeing the ring for the first time. But it was Camilla's reaction that everyone would remember. The color drained from her face as she stared at the emerald ring. Her carefully composed expression cracked, revealing a flash of something raw and primal. Fear? Anger? Jealousy? Perhaps all three. "That's impossible," Camilla said, her voice barely above a whisper. Diana's jewelry was all accounted for. Everything was cataloged and distributed according to her will. Catherine reached into her pocket and withdrew a letter, the paper aged but well-preserved. "This letter from Diana explains everything. She kept this ring separate from her official collection. It was her secret, something she wanted to pass on outside the official channels." She began to read from the letter, Diana's words filling the room like a presence. The letter spoke of hopes for the future, of the challenges the next Princess of Wales would face, of the strength needed to modernize the monarchy while respecting its traditions. Most pointedly, it spoke of the importance of putting the people first, of never forgetting that the crown's true power came from service. As Catherine read, Camilla's composure continued to crumble. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white with tension. This ring, this letter, they represented everything she had fought against for decades. Diana's shadow, which she thought had finally begun to fade, suddenly loomed larger than ever. "How dare you?" Camilla suddenly burst out, rising from her chair. "How dare you bring this theatrical prop into our family meeting? Do you have any idea what you're doing?" The outburst was so unexpected, so contrary to Camilla's usually controlled demeanor, that everyone in the room froze. Charles moved toward his wife, but she waved him away, her eyes fixed on Catherine with an intensity that was almost frightening. "You think you can waltz in here with some ring and a letter and claim Diana's mantle?" Camilla's voice rose with each word. "You have no idea what it was like, what we all went through. The pain, the public humiliation, the years of trying to build something from the ashes of that disaster." Catherine remained calm, though those close enough could see the slight tremor in her hands. "I'm not trying to cause pain, Camilla. This isn't about the past. It's about the future. Diana wanted her work to continue, her connection to the people to remain strong. This ring is a symbol of that commitment. A symbol. Camilla laughed, but there was no humor in it. It's a weapon, and you know it. Every time you wear that ring, every photo that's taken, every article that's written, it will be a reminder. Is that what you want? To drag us all back into that nightmare? William stood, moving protectively closer to his wife. Camilla, please. Catherine is trying to honor my mother's memory. There's no malice in this. But Camilla was beyond reasoning. Years of suppressed emotions, of careful control, and measured responses seemed to explode in that moment. Your mother, she spat. Always your mother. Do you think I don't know what everyone thinks? That I'm the villain in your fairy tale? That I destroyed your perfect family? Enough, Charles commanded, but his voice lacked its usual authority. He looked torn between his wife and his son, between the past and the future. Harry, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Maybe we all need to hear this. Maybe it's time we stop pretending that everything is fine when clearly it's not. Megan placed a warning hand on his arm, but Harry shook it off. The ring had awakened something in him, memories of his mother that he usually kept carefully locked away, and, ever practical, tried to restore order. This is getting us nowhere. We need to discuss this calmly and rationally. But Camilla was past the point of calm discussion. She pointed at Catherine, her hand shaking. You want to wear her ring? Fine. But know this, every time you put it on, you're choosing to live in the shadow of a ghost. You're choosing to be compared to someone who's been sainted by death, who can do no wrong because she's not here to make mistakes. The words hung in the air like poison. Catherine lifted her chin, finding strength from somewhere deep within. I'm not trying to be Diana. I'm trying to be myself, but carrying forward the best of what she represented. Compassion, connection with people, using this position to make a real difference. You naive girl, Camilla said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You think it's that simple? You think you can just decide to be the people's princess, and everyone will love you? I've spent decades being hated for falling in love. Decades of being called every name in the book, of having my children harassed, my character assassinated daily in the press. She turned to Charles, her eyes blazing. And you're just going to let this happen? Let her parade around with that ring, stirring up all the old stories, all the old pain. Charles looked older than his years in that moment. Camilla, my dear, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Privately? Camilla laughed bitterly. Nothing is private in this family. Everything we do, everything we say, it all becomes public eventually. And now she wants to make it worse by wearing that ring, that reminder of everything that went wrong. Catherine took a step forward. I'm not wearing it to hurt you, Camilla. I'm wearing it because Diana wanted me to have it. Because she believed in the future of this monarchy, in its ability to evolve and grow. This isn't about the past. It's about moving forward. Moving forward? Camilla's voice cracked. How can we move forward when you're literally wearing the past on your finger? The room watched in stunned silence as Camilla, always so controlled, so careful with her public image, completely unraveled. Her carefully styled hair seemed to wilt, her makeup no match for the tears that had begun to stream down her face. Do you know what it's like? She asked, her voice now barely audible. To love someone and be hated for it? To be blamed for the end of a marriage that was doomed long before you arrived? To watch your children suffer because of choices you made out of love? For a moment, Catherine's resolve wavered. She hadn't expected this level of emotion, this raw pain that had apparently been festering beneath Camilla's composed exterior for years. I know you've suffered, Catherine said softly, but Diana suffered too, and she wanted something positive to come from that suffering. She wanted the monarchy to be more connected to the people, more open, more real. This ring represents that hope. Camilla sank back in her chair, suddenly, looking every one of her years. Hope, she repeated hollowly. Diana's hope. Always Diana's hope. What about my hope? What about the hope that one day I could be judged for who I am, not for who I supposedly wrong? The family stood frozen, unsure how to respond to this unprecedented display of emotion. even and usually quick with a practical solution, seemed at a loss. It was William who finally broke the silence. Perhaps we all need to acknowledge that there's pain on all sides here. My mother suffered, yes. But, Camilla, you've suffered too. Maybe it's time we stop letting that pain define us. Harry nodded, surprising everyone by agreeing with his brother. William's right. We've all been trapped by the past for too long. Maybe Catherine wearing Mum's ring isn't about bringing up old pain. Maybe it's about finally moving beyond it. But Camilla wasn't ready for reconciliation. She stood again, her movements jerky and ungraceful, so unlike her usual poise. You could dress it up however you like, she said, looking directly at Catherine. But that ring is a declaration of war. You're choosing sides, and you're making it clear which side you're on. There don't have to be sides, Catherine protested. We're all family. Family. Camilla's laugh was harsh. We're not family. We're an institution, a business, a carefully managed brand. And you just introduced an element that threatens to destroy everything we've built. She moved toward the door, then turned back for one final word. Wear your ring, Catherine. Invoke her ghost. But remember, ghosts have a way of haunting the living, and not always in the ways we expect. With that, she swept from the room, leaving behind a stunned silence. The palace had seen many dramatic moments over the centuries, but few could match the raw emotion of what had just transpired. Charles stood frozen for a moment, torn between following his wife and staying with his family. Finally, with a mumbled excuse, he hurried after Camilla, leaving the others to process what had just happened. The silence stretched on, heavy with unspoken thoughts and emotions. Finally, and cleared her throat. Well, she said dryly, that was illuminating. The understatement broke some of the tension, but the damage had been done. The careful balance the family had maintained for years had been shattered, and everyone knew there would be consequences. Catherine looked down at the ring on her finger, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But then she remembered Diana's words in the letter about having courage in the face of opposition, about standing up for what was right even when it was difficult. She felt William's hand slip into hers, offering silent support. Looking around the room, she saw a mix of reactions. Harry seemed thoughtful, perhaps reevaluating his own relationship with his mother's memory. Meghan looked concerned, but supportive. Edward and Sophie exchanged worried glances, clearly concerned about the fallout from this confrontation. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, Catherine said finally. I thought we could discuss it rationally. And snorted. You thought you could bring Diana's secret ring to a family meeting and everyone would discuss it rationally? My dear, you have a lot to learn about this family. But there was no malice in her words, perhaps even a hint of approval, and had always respected those who stood their ground. And Catherine had certainly done that. As the family slowly dispersed, each processing the events in their own way, Catherine remained in the white drawing room with William. They stood by the window, looking out at the same gardens Charles had contemplated earlier. Are you sure about this? William asked quietly. Camilla's right about one thing. Once the public knows about this ring, everything will change. Catherine touched the emerald, feeling its cool surface against her skin. Your mother wanted me to have this for a reason. She saw something coming, some moment when I would need the strength it represents. I think that moment is now. William pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. Then we face it together. Whatever comes next, we face it together. As they stood there, neither could have predicted the full extent of what was to come. The revelation of Diana's ring would indeed change everything, setting in motion events that would transform the monarchy in ways no one could have imagined. The palace, which had been buzzing with the usual activity of a busy morning, seemed to hold its breath. Word of the confrontation spread quickly among the staff, though none would ever speak of it publicly. They had witnessed something unprecedented, a crack in the carefully maintained facade of royal unity. In her private chambers, Camilla sat at her dressing table, her reflection showing a woman stripped of all pretense. The makeup she had so carefully applied was ruined, her face showing every line, every year of struggle. Susan stood nearby, uncertain whether to offer comfort or maintain the professional distance that protocol demanded. "Leave me," Camilla said quietly, and Susan departed without a word. Alone, Camilla stared at herself in the mirror, seeing not the queen consort she had worked so hard to become, but the woman who had been vilified for decades. The appearance of Diana's ring had torn away the careful construction of acceptance she had built, revealing the raw wounds that had never truly healed. She had thought she was past this. The years since her marriage to Charles had been spent carefully building her position, earning, if not love then, at least acceptance from the public. She had worked tirelessly for her charities, had conducted herself with dignity despite the constant comparisons to Diana, had tried to be a supportive stepmother to William and Harry despite their understandable reservations. And now, with one piece of jewelry, it all threatened to come crashing down. Meanwhile, Charles paced in his study, his private secretary hovering nervously nearby. The king was rarely indecisive, but this situation had no precedent, no protocol to follow. His wife and his daughter-in-law were now at odds in a way that couldn't be smoothed over with careful words and diplomatic solutions. He thought of his mother, Elizabeth II, and how she would have handled this situation. She would have found a way to maintain unity, to present a united front regardless of private tensions. But times had changed. The monarchy couldn't rely on stoic silence anymore. The public demanded authenticity, transparency, emotional truth. And the truth was messy, complicated, painful. The truth was that he had loved two women, and the ghost of one continued to haunt his marriage to the other. The truth was that no amount of time could fully heal the wounds inflicted during those tumultuous years. The truth was that his sons still carried the scars of their parents' failed marriage, and now those scars were being reopened. Back in the white drawing room, Harry and Meghan were having their own intense discussion. The appearance of Diana's ring had stirred something in Harry, memories and emotions he usually kept carefully controlled. "She never told me," Harry said, his voice thick with emotion. "Mum never mentioned that ring to me." Meghan took his hand, understanding the pain behind his words. She probably knew William would need Catherine to have it, to help her navigate this world. Harry nodded slowly, but the hurt was evident. Once again, he felt like the spare, the one left out of important decisions. But beneath the hurt was something else, a recognition that perhaps his mother had known what she was doing. Catherine did need that ring, needed the strength it represented to stand up to the forces that would try to diminish her. As the day wore on, the palace remained in a state of suspended animation. Meetings were canceled, appointments rescheduled. Everyone seemed to be waiting for something, though no one quite knew what. It was Edward who finally voiced what everyone was thinking. "This changes everything," he said to Sophie as they walked in the palace gardens. "The dynamics, the public perception, everything." Sophie nodded thoughtfully. Catherine showed remarkable courage. But courage has consequences in this family. Indeed, the consequences were already beginning to manifest. Within hours, despite the family's best efforts at discretion, whispers began to circulate among the wider royal household. Something significant had happened, something involving the Queen Consort and the Princess of Wales. By evening, the tension in the palace was palpable. Dinner was a stilted affair, with Camilla notably absent. Charles ate in silence, his face drawn with worry. Catherine maintained her composure, but those who knew her well could see the strain in her eyes. It was and who finally addressed the elephant in the room. "We need a plan," she said briskly. "This situation is untenable. Either we find a way forward together, or we risk everything our mother built. What do you suggest?" William asked, grateful for his aunt's pragmatism. "First, we need to understand what we're really dealing with here," Anne replied. "This isn't just about a ring. It's about the past, the present, and the future of this institution. It's about how we honor those who came before while building something sustainable for those who come after." She looked directly at Catherine. "You've opened Pandora's box, my dear. The question now is whether we can control what comes out of it." Catherine met her gaze steadily. "I'm prepared for whatever comes. This ring, it's not just jewelry. It's a reminder of the connection between the monarchy and the people. Diana understood that in a way that was revolutionary for her time. We need to honor that understanding if we're going to survive as an institution. Survival, Charles said quietly, speaking for the first time since dinner began. Is that what we're reduced to? Mia survived. Sometimes survival is enough, Harry said, surprising everyone with his philosophical tone. Sometimes you have to survive the storm before you can rebuild. The meal continued in relative silence, each person lost in their own thoughts. The events of the day had forced them all to confront truths they had long avoided, to acknowledge wounds that had been bandaged, but never properly healed. As the family dispersed after dinner, Catherine found herself alone in the blue drawing room, the same room where she had prepared for the meeting that morning. So much had changed in just a few hours. She looked down at Diana's ring, wondering if she truly understood the magnitude of what she had done. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She was surprised to see Harry standing there, his expression uncertain. "Can I come in?" he asked. Catherine nodded, gesturing to a chair. They sat in silence for a moment before Harry spoke. "I need to know," he said quietly. "Why did she give it to you? Why not?" He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Catherine understood. Why not to him, Diana's youngest son, the one who perhaps needed her memory most? She chose her words carefully. I think she knew that whoever married William would need extra strength, would need something tangible to remind them that they weren't alone in facing the challenges of this role. Harry nodded slowly. "And do you?" "Feel less alone." Catherine touched the ring gently. "I feel connected to her vision, to the possibility of what this institution could be." "Camilla's not wrong, you know," Harry said suddenly. "About the comparisons, the ghost. Mum's been idealized in death in a way she never could have been in life. It's an impossible standard." "I know," Catherine admitted. "But I'm not trying to be her. I'm trying to honor what she started while being myself." Harry studied her for a long moment. "I think she would have liked you," he said finally. "I think she would have been proud." The words were a gift, and Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Harry. That means more than you know." After Harry left, Catherine remained in the drawing room, contemplating the day's events. She had known that revealing the ring would cause ripples, but she hadn't anticipated the tsunami of emotion it would unleash. A document that had been delivered earlier caught her eye. It was a report from one of Diana's former charities, outlining their work and expressing hope for renewed royal patronage. This was why she had revealed the ring now, not to cause pain or division, but to signal a renewed commitment to the causes Diana had championed. Mental health, homelessness, AIDS awareness, landmine removal, these weren't just charitable causes to tick off a list. They were fundamental issues that affected real people, people who looked to the royal family for leadership and hope. As night fell over Buckingham Palace, an uneasy quiet settled over the ancient building. In various rooms, members of the royal family grappled with the day's revelations and their implications. Charles sat in his study, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his recognition that Catherine had acted from genuine conviction. He thought of his mother's words about duty and service, about putting the institution above personal feelings. But at what cost? Camilla lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, reliving the moment she had seen Diana's ring. All her carefully built defenses had crumbled in an instant, revealing the frightened, vilified woman she had tried so hard to leave behind. William held Catherine close, whispering words of support and love. He knew the coming days would be difficult, but he also knew that his wife had the strength to weather whatever storm was approaching. And in their hotel room, Harry and Meghan discussed the day's events and what they might mean for their own complicated relationship with the royal family. The palace had indeed fallen silent, but it was the silence before the storm. The revelation of Diana's ring had set in motion forces that would reshape the monarchy in ways no one could fully predict. As Catherine finally prepared for bed, she carefully removed the emerald ring and placed it in a velvet box on her dressing table. Tomorrow, she would wear it again. Tomorrow, she would face whatever consequences her choice had brought. But tonight, she simply sat in the darkness, feeling the weight of history and the promise of the future in equal measure. Diana's legacy lived on, not just in the ring, but in the courage to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. The first part of this story was ending, but it was clear that this was only the beginning of a much larger tale. The palace had fallen silent, but soon it would echo with the sounds of change, of old wounds being addressed, and new paths being forged. The monarchy would survive, as it always had, but thanks to a single emerald ring and the courage of one woman to wear it, it might just do more than survive. It might transform. The next morning arrived with a crisp autumn chill that seemed to permeate the palace walls. Catherine woke early, as was her habit, but this morning felt different. The weight of yesterday's confrontation hung heavy in the air, and she knew that today would bring new challenges. William was already awake beside her, staring at the ornate ceiling of their bedroom. Neither spoke for several minutes, both processing the magnitude of what had been set in motion. "The press will find out," William said finally, his voice still rough with sleep. "Someone will talk. Someone always does." Catherine turned to face him, studying his profile in the soft morning light. "I know. I've been thinking about how to handle it." "Have you?" William turned to meet her eyes, a mixture of admiration and concern in his gaze. "Because once this gets out, there's no controlling the narrative. The tabloids will have a field day." Catherine sat up, pulling her knees to her chest. "Maybe it's time we stop trying to control everything. Your mother understood that sometimes you have to trust the people to see the truth." Meanwhile, in another wing of the palace, Camilla sat at her breakfast table, pushing food around her plate without eating. Charles sat across from her, the morning paper spread between them like a barrier. "You need to eat something," Charles said gently. Camilla's laugh was brittle. "Doi, so I can have strength for the next battle?" "It doesn't have to be a battle," Charles said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Doesn't it?" Camilla set down her fork with a sharp click. "She declared war yesterday, Charles. That ring, it's not just jewelry. It's a weapon, and she knows exactly how to wield it." Charles reached across the table, trying to take her hand, but Camilla pulled away. "My dear, perhaps if we could all sit down calmly." "Calmly?" Camilla's voice rose. "I've been calm for decades, Charles. I've smiled through the hatred, the comparisons, the constant reminder that I'm second best. And now your daughter-in-law wants to resurrect the ghost I've spent years trying to lay to rest." In the staff quarters, the palace employees were abuzz with whispered conversations. Margaret Thompson, who had served the royal family for 30 years, gathered her team for the morning briefing. "Whatever you may have heard about yesterday's family meeting," she said firmly, "remember that discretion is not just part of your job. It's a sacred trust. What happens within these walls stays within these walls." But even as she spoke, Margaret knew it was likely futile. In the age of social media and 24-hour news cycles, secrets had a way of escaping even the most tightly controlled environments. By mid-morning, Catherine was in her office, meeting with her private secretary, Amanda Morrison. They were reviewing her upcoming engagements, but both knew they were really preparing for the inevitable media storm. "Ma'am," Amanda said carefully, "perhaps we should consider a preemptive strategy, if we control the release of information." "No," Catherine said firmly. "No spin, no careful management. When the story breaks, we tell the truth. Diana left me this ring, and I'm wearing it to honor her legacy and continue her work." Amanda looked uncertain. "The Queen Consort? We'll have to find our own way to respond," Catherine finished. "I won't engage in a public battle, but I won't hide either." At that moment, William entered the office, his face grave. "It's starting," he said, holding up his phone. "Someone's leaked to the Daily Mail. They're running with a story about a major rift between you and Camilla." Catherine took the phone, scanning the article quickly. It was surprisingly accurate, suggesting someone with intimate knowledge of yesterday's events had talked. The headline screamed, "Palace in Crisis. Future Queen Catherine and Queen Camilla in explosive confrontation." "How did they find out so quickly?" Amanda asked, though they all knew the palace had always been porous when it came to explosive news. "It doesn't matter how," William said. What matters is how we respond. Catherine stood, moving to the window that overlooked the palace gardens. We don't respond. Not immediately. Let them speculate. When I appear in public wearing the ring, that will be response enough. In his office, Charles was having a similar conversation with his private secretary, Sir Michael Pemberton. Your Majesty, the press situation is escalating rapidly, Sir Michael reported. We need a unified response from the palace. Charles rubbed his temples, feeling every one of his years. What would you suggest, Michael? That we deny what happened? That we pretend my wife and daughter-in-law haven't just opened wounds we've spent decades trying to heal? Perhaps a statement emphasizing family unity? Sir Michael suggested delicately. Charles laughed bitterly. Unity? After what happened yesterday? The public isn't stupid, Michael. They'll see through any attempt at papering over this crisis. The crisis deepened as the hours passed. By lunchtime, every major news outlet had picked up the story. Royal correspondents who had covered the family for decades were called in to provide context, many drawing parallels to the dark days of Charles and Diana's marriage. In a surprising move, Harry and Meghan, who were supposed to fly back to California that afternoon, announced they were extending their stay. Harry released a brief statement. Family matters require family solutions. We stand ready to support reconciliation and healing. The statement sent royal watchers into overdrive. Harry and Meghan's involvement added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. And, ever practical, called an emergency meeting of the working royals, excluding Camilla, who had declined to attend. We need to present a united front, and said briskly. Whatever our personal feelings, the institution must come first. The institution, Catherine said quietly, is only as strong as the values it represents. If we continue to prioritize appearance over truth, we'll lose the very thing that gives the monarchy meaning, its connection to the people. Edward cleared his throat. With respect, Catherine, that's a rather idealistic view. The monarchy has survived precisely because it knows when to reveal and when to conceal. And look where that's gotten us, Harry interjected. Decades of pain swept under the rug, only to explode at the worst possible moment. The meeting continued for hours, with no clear resolution. The fundamental divide was too deep. There were those who believed in the traditional approach of maintaining dignity through silence, and those who felt the monarchy needed to embrace a new transparency. As the meeting concluded, William pulled Harry aside. The brothers had their own complicated history, but the current crisis had created an unexpected opportunity for connection. Thank you for staying, William said simply. Harry nodded. She was our mother. Whatever else divides us, that unites us. Catherine didn't mean for it to happen like this, William said. She just wanted to honor Mum's wishes. I know, Harry replied. But you have to admit, there's something poetic about it. Mum always did have a flair for the dramatic, even from beyond. Meanwhile, Camilla had retreated to Highgrove, her country residence, seeking refuge from the storm. But even there, she couldn't escape the magnitude of what was happening. Her phone rang constantly with calls from friends and allies offering support, but also seeking gossip. She sat in her garden, the same garden she had lovingly tended for years, and felt everything she had built crumbling around her. The careful construction of her public image, the gradual acceptance she had won through years of hard work and dignity, all of it threatened by a single piece of jewelry. Her son Tom arrived in the evening, having driven down from London as soon as he heard the news. Mum, he said, enveloping her in a hug. I'm so sorry. This must be incredibly difficult. Camilla allowed herself a moment of vulnerability in her son's arms before pulling back and straightening her spine. I've weathered worse storms, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Have you talked to Charles? Tom asked gently. What's there to say? Camilla replied. His daughter-in-law has chosen to resurrect his first wife, and he's paralyzed between us. I won't force him to choose. Maybe you should, Tom suggested. Maybe it's time to stop being so accommodating. Camilla looked at her son, seeing the protective anger in his eyes, and become the villain they've always painted me as? No, don't. If I've learned anything over the years, it's that you can't fight a ghost. Diana won in life, and she's winning in death. Back at Buckingham Palace, Catherine was preparing for her first public appearance since the story broke. She had a long-scheduled visit to a children's hospital, one of Diana's former patronages. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. As her stylist helped her dress, Catherine made a deliberate choice. She selected a sapphire blue dress, a color strongly associated with Diana, and prominently displayed the emerald ring on her right hand. "Are you sure, ma'am?" her stylist asked nervously. "I'm sure," Catherine replied, checking her reflection one final time. The car ride to the hospital was tense. Catherine's security detail had been increased due to concerns about public reaction, and protesters had already gathered, though it wasn't clear whether they were supporting her or Camilla. As the car pulled up to the hospital, Catherine could see the massive press presence. Cameras lined the entrance, and reporters shouted questions before she even emerged from the vehicle. Catherine stepped out gracefully, the emerald ring catching the light and causing an immediate frenzy among the photographers. She walked steadily toward the hospital entrance, ignoring the shouted questions about Camilla and the family rift. Inside the hospital, the atmosphere was markedly different. The sick children and their families didn't care about palace intrigue. They were simply grateful for the royal visit, for the attention it brought to their cause. Catherine spent hours at the hospital, sitting with children, talking to parents, consulting with doctors about their needs. She was in her element here, demonstrating the kind of genuine connection with people that Diana had pioneered. One mother, holding a child with leukemia, touched Catherine's hand. She would be proud, the woman said simply, glancing at the ring. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, but maintained her composure. "Thank you," she whispered. The visit was a public relations triumph. Photos of Catherine comforting sick children, wearing Diana's ring while continuing her work, created a powerful narrative that no amount of palace spin could have achieved. But the triumph came at a cost. When Catherine returned to the palace, she found Charles waiting for her. "We need to talk," the king said, his face grave. They went to his study, where Charles poured himself a whiskey before speaking. "Camilla has asked to separate her public duties from yours. She won't appear at any events where you're present." Catherine felt the blow, but tried not to show it. "I'm sorry it's come to this." "Are you?" Charles asked, and there was an edge to his voice she'd rarely heard. "Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you knew exactly what would happen when you revealed that ring." "I knew it would cause discussion," Catherine admitted, "but I didn't anticipate the level of emotion." Charles laughed bitterly. "Emotion? Is that what we're calling it?" "My wife had a breakdown, Catherine. A woman who has endured decades of public hatred with dignity and grace was reduced to screaming because of a piece of jewelry." "It's not just jewelry," Catherine said firmly. "And you know that. It represents everything unresolved between your past and present. And you decided you had the right to force that resolution." Charles's anger was now apparent. "Who gave you that authority?" "Diana did," Catherine replied simply. "When she left me this ring, she gave me the responsibility to carry forward her legacy. I won't shirk that responsibility because it makes people uncomfortable." Charles stared at her for a long moment. "You're playing a dangerous game, Catherine. The monarchy survives through stability, not revolution." "Maybe it's time for evolution, not just survival," Catherine countered. "The people are tired of the facade. They want authenticity, connection, truth." "The truth." Charles set down his glass hard. "The truth is that I loved two women, and the conflict between them nearly destroyed this family. The truth is that my sons grew up in a war zone of competing loyalties. The truth is that Camilla has spent decades paying for the crime of falling in love with a man who wasn't free to love her back. Is that the truth you want to expose?" Catherine stood her ground. "The truth I want to expose is that this family can acknowledge its past while building a better future. That we can honor Diana's memory without erasing Camilla's contributions. That we could be both traditional and modern, both dignified and accessible." "You're naive," Charles said, but some of the anger had left his voice. "You think you can reconcile the irreconcilable." "I think I can try," Catherine replied. "And I think Diana believed I could succeed, or she wouldn't have left me this ring. The conversation ended without resolution, both understanding that the fundamental divide was too deep to bridge in a single discussion. As Catherine returned to her apartment, she found William waiting with their children. George, Charlotte, and Louis ran to her, oblivious to the palace drama swirling around them. "Mummy, you're on television," Charlotte exclaimed, pointing to the news coverage of the hospital visit. Catherine hugged her children close, reminded of what truly mattered. Whatever battles she faced with Camilla or Charles, her primary responsibility was to prepare these children for their future roles. Later that evening, as the children slept, William and Catherine sat together in their sitting room, exhausted by the day's events. "Charles is right about one thing," William said quietly. "This could destroy everything, or it could transform everything," Catherine countered. "Your mother believed the monarchy needed to change. Maybe this crisis is the catalyst for that change." William pulled her close. "I just hope we all survive it." The days that followed were a whirlwind of media coverage, public debate, and palace maneuvering. Opinion polls showed the public was deeply divided, with younger people generally supporting Catherine and older generations sympathizing with Camilla. The international press had a field day with the story. "The War of the Queens," one American outlet called it. French newspapers drew parallels to historical royal feuds. Even the typically reserved Japanese media covered the story extensively. Within the palace, staff found themselves walking on eggshells. The Queen Consort's staff and the Princess of Wales's staff, previously collaborative, now operated in separate spheres. Scheduling became a nightmare as events had to be carefully arranged to avoid any overlap. Harry and Meghan's continued presence added another dynamic. They met separately with both Catherine and Camilla, trying to broker some kind of peace. But their efforts were complicated by their own fraught history with the institution. One afternoon, Meghan found herself alone with Camilla in the Rose Garden. It was an accidental meeting, both women having sought solitude in the same space. "I suppose you're enjoying this," Camilla said, her voice tired rather than accusatory. Meghan chose her words carefully. "I wouldn't wish this pain on anyone. I know what it's like to be vilified by the press, to have your every move scrutinized and found wanting." Camilla studied her stepdaughter-in-law with new interest. "Yes, I suppose you do. The difference," Meghan continued gently, "is that you've endured it for decades. I couldn't manage more than a few years. And yet you survived by leaving," Camilla observed. "That option isn't available to all of us." They stood in silence for a moment, two women who had both been painted as villains in the royal narrative, finding an unexpected moment of connection. "Catherine isn't your enemy," Meghan said finally. "She's just trying to find her way, like we all did. By invoking Diana," Camilla's voice was bitter. "By wearing that ring like a talisman against me. By honoring a legacy that meant something to millions of people," Meghan corrected gently. "It doesn't diminish your legacy, Camilla. You've built your own through years of service." Camilla turned away. Service that no one remembers when Diana's ghost enters the room. The conversation haunted Meghan, who reported it to Harry that evening. The complexity of the situation was becoming clearer. This wasn't simply about a ring, or even about Catherine and Camilla. It was about decades of unresolved trauma, public expectations, and the impossible position of trying to honor the past while building a future. A week after the initial confrontation, Catherine made another significant public appearance. This time, it was at a gala for Centerpoint, a homeless charity that Diana had championed and where William was now patron. Catherine arrived wearing an elegant black gown, the emerald ring prominently displayed. But this time, she also wore a brooch that had belonged to the Queen Mother, a subtle nod to the broader royal tradition. The speech she gave that night would be remembered as a turning point in the crisis. Standing before hundreds of guests and, with cameras broadcasting live, Catherine addressed the elephant in the room. "This ring," she said, touching the emerald, "has caused much discussion over the past week. Some see it as divisive, others as inspiring. But I want to tell you what it means to me." The room was silent, everyone hanging on her words. "This ring represents continuity, not just of one person's legacy, but of the values that make our monarchy meaningful. Compassion for those who suffer. Connection with people from all walks of life. The courage to evolve and grow while honoring our traditions. She paused, seeming to gather her strength. Princess Diana understood that the crown's true power lies not in its jewels or palaces, but in its ability to shine light on those who need it most. She revolutionized how the royal family connects with people. But she wasn't the first to understand this, and she won't be the last. Catherine looked directly at the cameras. Queen Camilla has spent decades serving this country with dignity and dedication. Her work with domestic violence survivors, literacy programs, and animal welfare has made a real difference in countless lives. We don't have to choose between honoring Diana's memory and respecting Camilla's service. We can do both. The speech was a masterclass in diplomacy, acknowledging the conflict while attempting to build bridges. The immediate reaction was positive, with many praising Catherine's statesmanship. But in her private rooms at Highgrove, Camilla watched the speech with mixed emotions. The olive branch was apparent, but so was the steel beneath Catherine's silk glove. The younger woman was claiming the moral high ground while appearing magnanimous. Clever girl, Camilla murmured to herself. Diana would indeed be proud. Charles, watching from Buckingham Palace, felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps Catherine had found a way forward after all. He immediately called Camilla. "Did you watch?" he asked. "Every word," Camilla replied. And there was a long pause. "She's trying, Charles. I can see that. But seeing and feeling are two different things. The wound is too fresh, too deep. My darling, we have to find a way past this," Charles pleaded. "For the sake of the institution, if nothing else." "The institution," Camilla repeated. "Always the institution. What about the people, Charles? What about the woman who has stood by your side through everything?" "You know you mean everything to me," Charles said. "Doi." Camilla's voice was soft but pointed, because from where I'm sitting, it seems like Diana still holds your heart, even in death. And now Catherine has picked up her torch, and you're all mesmerized by the light. The conversation ended without resolution, leaving Charles alone with his thoughts and the weight of kingship heavier than ever on his shoulders. Meanwhile, a late-night meeting was taking place in William and Catherine's apartment. Harry and Meghan had come for dinner, and the conversation had evolved into a strategic planning session. "You handled that speech brilliantly," Harry admitted. "But Camilla won't be won over by words alone." "I know," Catherine said, "but I had to try. The public needed to see that this isn't about choosing sides." "Isn't it, though?" Meghan asked gently. "By wearing Diana's ring, you have chosen a side, whether you intended to or not." William bristled. "She's chosen to honor my mother's memory." "Why is that controversial?" "Because your mother's memory is weaponized," Harry said bluntly. "It has been since the day she died. Every woman who enters this family is compared to her. Camilla, Meghan, Catherine, none of us can escape her shadow." "And maybe that's the point," Catherine said quietly. "Maybe instead of trying to escape it, we need to embrace it, learn from it, build on it." "That's easy for you to say," Meghan observed. "You fit the Diana mold. Young, beautiful, beloved by the public. Camilla and we were the outsiders, the ones who didn't fit the fairy tale." The observation hung in the air, uncomfortable in its truth. Catherine had advantages that Camilla had never enjoyed, and the ring had become a symbol of that disparity. "So what do we do?" William asked finally. "How do we move forward?" "Carefully," Harry said. "Very carefully, because right now, the institution is more fragile than it's been since the abdication crisis." As the evening ended and Harry and Meghan returned to their hotel, William and Catherine were left to contemplate the path ahead. The ring sat in its velvet box on the dresser, its emerald depths seeming to hold secrets and promises in equal measure. "Do you regret it?" William asked as they prepared for bed. Catherine considered the question carefully. "No," she said finally. "Whatever happens, I believe this was necessary. The truth has a way of demanding to be acknowledged, even if it tears everything apart." William pressed. "Even then," Catherine replied, because maybe some things need to be torn apart before they can be rebuilt stronger. Outside, London slept fitfully, unaware that within the palace walls, a revolution was quietly taking place. The old order was crumbling, and what would rise in its place remained to be seen. The second act of this royal drama was drawing to a close, but the story was far from over. The ring had been revealed, the battle lines drawn, and now the real work would begin. Could the monarchy find a way to honor its past while embracing its future? Could wounds decades in the making finally heal? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. The palace would never be the same again. 3 weeks had passed since the revelation of Diana's ring, and the palace had settled into an uncomfortable new rhythm. The initial shock had given way to a cold war, with various factions forming within the royal household. Catherine continued her public duties, wearing the ring at every appearance, while Camilla maintained her separate schedule, the two women moving through the same palace like ships in the night. The strain was beginning to show on everyone. Charles looked haggard, aged by the constant mediation between his wife and daughter-in-law. William threw himself into his work, using his environmental initiatives as an escape from the domestic tensions. Even the children had noticed the change, with young George asking why Gone Camilla no longer joined them for Sunday lunch. It was and who finally decided enough was enough. The Princess Royal had watched the situation deteriorate with growing frustration, her practical nature offended by the ongoing drama. "This is ridiculous," she announced, barging into Charles's study one morning. Mother would be appalled by this spectacle. Charles looked up from his papers, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. "What would you have me do, Anne? Force them to be friends? I'd have you act like a king," and retorted, "instead of a man caught between two women." "Oh, wait, that sounds familiar, doesn't it?" The barb hit home, and Charles flinched. "That's unfair, is it?" and sat down uninvited. "Charles, you're letting history repeat itself because you're too paralyzed by guilt to take action. Camilla needs support, Catherine needs guidance, and you're giving neither. And what about what I need?" Charles snapped, rare anger flashing in his eyes. "What you need," and said firmly, "is to remember that the crown comes first. Always. Your personal feelings, Camilla's hurt, Catherine's idealism, none of it matters compared to the stability of the institution." Meanwhile, Catherine was meeting with an unexpected visitor. Paul Burrell, Diana's former butler who had given her the ring, had requested a private audience. "Your Royal Highness," Paul said, bowing deeply, "I've been watching the situation unfold, and I feel I must speak." Catherine gestured for him to sit. "Please, Paul, any insight would be welcome." Paul pulled out a worn envelope. There was a second letter. "Diana asked me to give it to you only if the first caused significant disruption." Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. Inside was another letter in Diana's distinctive handwriting. "My dear Catherine," she read silently, "if you're reading this, then my first gift has caused a stir I anticipated. The palace never changes, does it? They will try to make you choose between honoring my memory and keeping the peace. Don't let them. The ring was never about me versus Camilla. That battle was fought and lost long ago with casualties on all sides. The ring is about the future, about ensuring that the monarchy remembers its true purpose, to serve, to compassionate, to connect. Camilla will see it as an attack because she has been conditioned to see everything through the lens of that old battle. Help her understand that the war is over. We all lost, but from those ashes something new can grow. Be patient with Charles. He carries guilt that has calcified into paralysis. He loved us both in different ways at different times. That's not a crime, though it caused tremendous pain. Most importantly, remember that the crown is not about the people who wear it, but the people who support it. Every time you doubt yourself, every time the palace politics threaten to overwhelm you, go out and meet the people. They will remind you why this matters. I'm counting on you to do what I couldn't, to bridge the gap between tradition and progress, to heal the wounds that festered during my time. The ring is just a symbol. You are the reality. With love and hope, Diana. Catherine read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face by the end. Paul waited quietly, having delivered his message. She knew, Catherine whispered. She knew exactly what would happen. The princess was many things, Paul said softly, but naive wasn't one of them. She understood the palace better than anyone gave her credit for. After Paul left, Catherine sat alone, contemplating Diana's words. The second letter had given her renewed purpose, but also a heavier burden. How could she help Camilla see past the old wounds? How could she bridge a gap that had existed for decades? Her contemplation was interrupted by an urgent call from Amanda. "Ma'am, you need to see this. The Daily Mail has published excerpts from a supposed diary of Camilla's. It's explosive." Catherine quickly accessed the article on her tablet. The excerpts, if genuine, revealed Camilla's private thoughts about the ring revelation. The language was raw, painful, and deeply personal. It spoke of feeling erased, of Catherine dancing on my grave while I'm still alive, of Charles being bewitched by Diana's ghost once again. "Are they real?" Catherine asked Amanda. Camilla's office is refusing to comment, which usually means, "They're real," Catherine finished. Her heart sank. This would pour fuel on an already raging fire. Indeed, within hours, the leaked diary entries had gone viral. Hashtag Team Camilla and hashtag Team Catherine began trending on social media, with public opinion splitting even more dramatically. The younger generation rallied behind Catherine, praising her for honoring Diana and modernizing the monarchy. Older royalists sympathized with Camilla, seeing her as a woman who had paid her dues being unfairly attacked. At Highgrove, Camilla was incandescent with rage. "How dare they?" she raged at her personal secretary. "Those were private thoughts, never meant for public consumption." "Ma'am, we're investigating how the leak occurred," her secretary assured her. "Investigating?" Camilla laughed bitterly. "What's to investigate? Someone in this household betrayed me. Probably someone who supports that girl and her crusade to resurrect Diana." The accusation was unfair, but Camilla was beyond caring about fairness. The publication of her private thoughts had stripped away her last offenses, leaving her raw and exposed in a way she hadn't been since the darkest days of the Diana years. Charles arrived at Highgrove that evening, having canceled a state dinner to be with his wife. He found her in the garden, staring at the roses she had cultivated so carefully over the years. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "For what?" Camilla asked without turning. "For the leak? For Catherine? For Diana? For the whole bloody mess our lives have become?" "For all of it," Charles admitted, moving to stand beside her. "For every moment of pain you've endured because you loved me." Camilla finally looked at him, and Charles was shocked to see how much she had aged in the past few weeks. The strong, dignified woman he married seemed to have crumbled under the weight of renewed scrutiny. "I can't do this again, Charles," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't be the villain in their fairy tale. Not again." "You're not a villain," Charles insisted, taking her hands. "You're my wife, my queen, my partner." "Your second wife," Camilla corrected. "Your second choice." And now the world is reminded of that every time they see that damned ring on Catherine's finger. Charles pulled her into his arms, feeling her shake with suppressed sobs. "What do you want me to do? Tell me, and I'll do it." Camilla pulled back, looking him directly in the eye. "I want you to choose, Charles. For once in your life, clearly and definitively. Either you support your wife, or you support this resurrection of Diana. You can't have both." The ultimatum hung between them, heavy with implications. Charles knew this moment had been coming, but he had hoped to avoid it, to find some middle ground that would satisfy everyone. "You're asking me to choose between my wife and my son's wife," Charles said slowly. "Between you and the future of the monarchy." "No," Camilla said firmly. "I'm asking you to choose between the living and the dead. Between the woman who has stood by your side and the ghost that Catherine seems determined to channel." Back at Buckingham Palace, William was dealing with his own crisis. George had come home from school upset, having been teased by classmates about the family fight they had seen on the news. "Dad, why are Granny and Mummy angry at each other?" George asked, his young face creased with worry. William knelt down to his son's level. "They're not angry, George. They just see things differently sometimes. Like when Charlotte and I fight over toys? George asked. Something like that, William agreed, though the comparison seemed woefully inadequate. But Mummy and Granny don't play with toys, George pointed out with a child's logic. William sighed. No, they don't. They're disagreeing about how to do their jobs. Being princesses? George asked. Yes, being princesses, William confirmed. Maybe they should take turns, George suggested. Like we do with the PlayStation. William hugged his son, wishing the solution could be that simple. Maybe they should, George. Maybe they should. That evening, Harry called from California. He and Megan had returned home after their extended stay, but they had been following the situation closely. It's getting worse, isn't it? Harry said without preamble. The diary leak has escalated everything, William admitted. I don't know how we come back from this. You need to do something, Will, Harry urged. This isn't just about Camilla and Catherine anymore. It's about the future of the whole institution. I know, William said wearily. But what? Every move we make seems to make things worse. Maybe that's because you're all trying to manage the situation instead of addressing the root cause, Harry suggested. Which is the fact that this family has never properly dealt with what happened between Dad, Mom, and Camilla. It's been decades of sweeping it under the rug, and now Catherine's lifted the corner and all the dirt is spilling out. William couldn't argue with his brother's assessment. So what do you suggest? Truth and reconciliation, Harry said. Not the managed palace version, but actual, honest conversation about what happened and how to move forward. You think Camilla would agree to that? Or Dad? William asked skeptically. I think they might not have a choice, Harry replied, because the alternative is watching the monarchy tear itself apart. The conversation gave William much to think about. As he returned to his apartment, he found Catherine in the children's playroom, helping Louis with a puzzle. How are you holding up? He asked, sitting beside her on the floor. Catherine managed a weak smile. I've been better. The diary entries were private thoughts that should have remained private, William finished. Whatever Camilla wrote, she didn't intend for public consumption. I know, Catherine said, fitting a puzzle piece into place. I actually feel terrible for her. No one should have their private thoughts exposed like that. Have you considered? William paused, choosing his words carefully. Have you considered not wearing the ring for a while? Just until things calm down? Catherine looked at him sharply. Would you ask me to remove my engagement ring if someone found it offensive? That's different, William protested. Is it? Catherine challenged. Both were given with love, with intention. Both carry meaning beyond their monetary value. Diana gave me this ring for a reason, William. I won't dishonor her trust because it makes people uncomfortable. Even if it destroys Camilla, William asked quietly. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. I don't want to destroy anyone, but I also can't live my life tiptoeing around other people's unresolved trauma. Camilla needs to make peace with the past, but that's her journey, not mine. The firmness in her voice reminded William why he had fallen in love with her. Catherine had a spine of steel beneath her gracious exterior, a quality that served her well as future queen, but complicated the current situation. The next morning brought a new development. A palace insider had leaked information about Charles's whereabouts the previous evening, revealing that he had canceled a state dinner to be with Camilla. The press interpreted this as Charles choosing sides, with headlines screaming, "King chooses Camilla over country." The criticism was swift and harsh. Constitutional experts debated whether Charles had the right to cancel official duties for personal reasons. Republicans used it as ammunition for their anti-monarchy arguments. Even monarchy supporters expressed concern about the king's priorities. Charles, already stretched thin, felt the criticism keenly. He had tried to support his wife, and now he was being pilloried for it. It seemed that every decision he made only deepened the crisis. It was in this atmosphere that an unexpected player entered the game. Princess Beatrice, often overlooked in the grand scheme of royal politics, requested a meeting with Catherine. I know I'm not a senior royal, Beatrice said as they walked in the palace gardens, but I have a unique perspective on this situation. Catherine was intrigued. How so? My parents' very public divorce, the scandals, the constant media scrutiny, Beatrice explained. I know what it's like to be caught in the crossfire of palace drama. And I learned something important. Sometimes the only way through is to acknowledge the pain instead of pretending it doesn't exist. What are you suggesting? Catherine asked. A joint engagement, Beatrice said. You and Camilla, together at a charity event. Not addressing the elephant in the room, but standing side by side despite it. Show the world that whatever personal differences exist, the work continues. Catherine considered the proposal. It had merit, but would Camilla agree? And even if she did, could they pull it off without the tension being obvious? I'll think about it, Catherine promised. As Beatrice left, Catherine found herself in the blue drawing room, the same room where this had all started. She looked at Diana's portrait on the wall, seeking guidance from a woman long gone, but whose presence still loomed large. What would you do? She whispered to the portrait. How would you bridge this gap? The portrait, of course, remained silent. But Catherine thought she knew the answer. Diana would have gone to the people, would have let their needs guide her actions rather than palace protocol. With sudden decision, Catherine called Amanda. Cancel my appointments for tomorrow. I'll make some unscheduled visits. Homeless shelters, food banks, anywhere people are struggling. No media alerts, no fanfare. Just me doing the work. Ma'am, without proper security arrangements. Amanda began. Make it happen, Catherine said firmly. It's time to remember what really matters. The next day, as Catherine quietly visited a homeless shelter in East London, something remarkable happened. Word spread organically through social media that the princess was there not for a photo opportunity, but genuinely serving meals and talking to people. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Pictures and videos flooded social media, showing Catherine in casual clothes, her hair pulled back, wearing Diana's ring as she ladled soup, and listened to people's stories. One video went particularly viral. A homeless woman had recognized the ring and asked about it. Catherine's response was captured on someone's phone. This ring reminds me that every person matters, Catherine said simply. Princess Diana understood that. She saw people, not statistics. That's what I'm trying to do, to see you, to hear you, to help where I can. The authenticity of the moment, the lack of polish or PR spin, resonated deeply with the public. Here was a future queen who understood that royalty meant service, not just ceremonial duties. At Highgrove, Camilla watched the coverage with Charles. For the first time since the ring's revelation, she felt something other than anger or hurt. She felt challenged. She's good, Camilla admitted grudgingly. She knows how to connect with people. Like Diana did, Charles said carefully. Yes, Camilla agreed, surprising him. Like Diana did. And perhaps that's not a bad thing. Charles looked at his wife in amazement. Are you saying? I'm saying that I've been so focused on feeling attacked that I haven't considered whether there might be something to learn here, Camilla said slowly. I've spent so many years defending myself against Diana's memory that I forgot what made her special in the first place. It was a breakthrough, small but significant. Charles took Camilla's hand, feeling hope for the first time in weeks. What do you want to do? He asked. Camilla was quiet for a long moment. I want to talk to Catherine. Privately, without handlers or advisors. Woman to woman. The request surprised everyone when Camilla made it official the next day. Catherine, still riding high from the positive response to her shelter visits, was cautious but agreed. They met at Clarence House, neutral ground that held memories for both women. Camilla had lived there with Charles before becoming queen, and Catherine had visited many times for family gatherings. There, Camilla offered as Catherine arrived. Please, Catherine accepted, both women maintaining formal politeness. They sat in Camilla's private sitting room, the tension palpable. Neither spoke for several minutes, sipping tea and avoiding eye contact. Finally, Camilla broke the silence. I owe you an apology. My behavior at the family meeting was unacceptable. Catherine was surprised by the directness. We were all emotional. The situation is complex. Complex, Camilla repeated with a dry laugh. That's one word for it. Hellish might be another. The unexpected humor broke some of the tension, and Catherine found herself almost smiling. I've been thinking, Camilla continued, about Diana, about you, about this whole mess. And I realized something. I've been fighting a ghost for so long that I forgot I'm not in competition with her anymore. You never were, Catherine said gently. Diana's story ended tragically. Yours is still being written. Camilla looked at her daughter-in-law with new eyes. You really believe that? Even wearing her ring, channeling her legacy? I'm not channeling anyone, Catherine said firmly. I'm being myself, but learning from those who came before. Diana taught the monarchy about compassion and connection. You've taught it about resilience and dignity. Both lessons matter. Pretty words, Camilla said, but not unkindly. The question is, can we make them reality? I'd like to try, Catherine offered. If